Welcome to our 54th episode of Reaching Minds, Thoughts for Your Life's Journey. In this podcast, we will be exploring our own narrative with risk and how risk can make us feel fearful and limit our growth and development. We will be also dissecting the success equation, a set of strategies, attributes, and determination from the book Undeterred, written by Claudia Crawley, my guest today. Now, Claudia, who I've known for a number of years, is a formidable person. She owns her own space as an executive coach, mentor, award-winning author, and has been a long-standing involvement with anti-racism, gender, and race equality. Claudia runs her own business called Winning Pathways Coaching, which she set up in 2010. She's also an alumni of the Cherie
Blair.
She is also the alumni of Cherie Blair Foundation for Women, assisting women business owners to internationally to develop, lead, and thrive. Claudia's mission is to change the world one woman at a time. Welcome, Claudia.
Hi, thank you for having me. Can I just say, Nita, that I'm not an award-winning author. I'm an award-winning mentor.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you
Don't
for.
want to give people any illusions about me.
I think you'd be fine, actually. I guess, Claudia, what got my interest for us to do this podcast was your recent post on LinkedIn around when we fear failure. And when we fear failure, we avoid risk and we avoid growth.
Right.
Tell me, what was the observation and the experience that led you to say this?
Okay. Wow, I love that question. Well, over the years, I've coached a lot of women who are quietly holding themselves back from progression. And they may hesitate to apply for promotion or take on a stretch project or make a sideways move into something which is going to be a bit more competitive. And on the surface, this looks like caution. In reality, it's fear. Fear of not getting a role, fear of being exposed, fear of failure. And when we peel back the layers, the fear is rarely about the role itself. At the core, it's often about something which is a bit more fundamental, like fear of reputational damage, fear of losing credibility, or even fear of losing everything. And for many women, that failure is it could be it's not a temporary setback. It's interpreted as the loss of something that's deeply important to them.
Mm.
And now my coaching, the work actually involves reframing failure through a different lens. And we examine it not as a standpoint, but as a source of insight, learning, strength development, and growth. Because failure and success they're like the two sides of the same coin, I should say. They're partners. There is no meaningful success without failure along the way. If I give you some examples, because there's loads of them in history. You take Oprah Winfrey, everybody knows Oprah, and that's why I chose her. She faced early career setbacks, and that included being demoted from a news anchor role. And instead of stopping, she built her resilience. She learned from those experiences and she grew into a global icon with the Oprah Winfrey Show, which I'm sure we all know.
Mm.
And also, she built her own network, which is still going. And then we've got J.K. Rowling, she of Harry Potter fame. She endured poverty, single motherhood, and multiple rejection before Harry Potter actually transformed her life and literature. And what some people would label failure became the very foundation of her resilience, her courage, and her growth.
Yeah,
And sorry, if you just
yeah,
imagine if either of them had allowed these early setbacks to define them or hold them back, the world would be much poorer for it, wouldn't it?
completely agree.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think it is the way of, learning from your failures. And one of the things, I guess, from my perspective over the last 30 years is uh, the sort of focusing so much on positivity that sometimes people haven't grasped that failure is a part of the journey in building your own kind of resilience. It doesn't, it diminishes you at the time. Sure, we can, we've all had
Mm.
failure where we've lived with it and been uncomfortable with it. And it's always been a point of growth and development if we recognize it and build on it. And I think our society somehow sees failure, or at least from my perspective, as a negative. Yeah,
I
I
totally
agree with
agree with
you.
you, Rita. I'd
Yeah.
absolutely agree with you. It's about us reframing failure and just
Yes.
looking at it from a positive angle
Yes.
and embracing it. It is, as
Yes.
you say, it's
Yes.
absolutely part of that journey.
Yeah, and the reason, the reframing it and living with it and being
Mm,
with it,
mm,
it is uncomfortable. And, as I would say to my daughter, it's not forever.
mm.
It will, if that too shall pass. And we're gonna touch on your book, Undeterred, in a minute. But one of the things I want to kind of touch on is, taking things at a macro level, in terms of race and gender equality.
Okay.
How do you think some of the corporate landscape have changed today from what they were, let's say, 10 years
Yeah,
ago, from
yeah,
your
yeah,
experience?
yeah.
I sneezed.
Okay. Oh, there's definitely been a change. I mean, and that corporate and public sector, and it's not been in a straight line, and it's certainly not been in a way that guaranteed progress. When I began my career in criminal justice a long time ago, and then later in social work, Black and brown women in leadership were exceptionally rare. In fact, I was the first Black woman appointed to a managerial role in the Inner London Probation Service, and only the second one nationally. Just
Wow.
imagine that. Yeah.
Mm,
And in the 1980s, career progression for Black and brown professionals required collective struggle.
mm,
So equity wasn't assumed. You had to basically you had to fight for it. And when I talk
mm,
about equity, I'm talking about responding to people's needs. So you're allocating the resources and the support based on their needs to guarantee fairness and a level playing field. So over time, these efforts did lead to some progress. Wasn't perfect, but we all thought it was going to get better, even better.
mm,
I witnessed more Black and brown professionals moving into senior roles alongside the development of anti-racist and anti-sexist policies and practice. But that progress proved really fragile. So you'd get like a single leadership change, for example, when a director who neither understood nor prioritized equity, diversity, and inclusion would take charge. and that was enough to stall the momentum,
Mm.
right? So promotion pathways narrowed, and when senior black and brown leaders moved on or were made redundant, they weren't replaced. So the message was clear, even though it was unspoken. In 2020, following the murder of George Floyd, which I'm sure we'll all remember, there was a global outpouring of support for EDI, or equity, diversity, and inclusion. Organisations made incredible, some of them made incredibly bold commitments. Whether it was performative or not, well, that was the question. And then, yet many of those pledges, they were performative and they weren't embedded. And what we're now seeing is not stagnation, we're seeing regression.
Mm.
And you look at this in the current political climate. With Donald Trump, when he came back into power in the US, what he did, he kind of orchestrated an overt backlash against EDI initiatives. And in the UK, Reform UK had been explicit about wanting to dismantle EDI programs within councils and government should they gain power. Now, if the US experience is anything to go by, some organisations in the UK will quietly follow suit. Well, we'll see. What makes this particularly troubling is the social work itself. It's a profession built on values of social justice, empathy, and equity.
Mm.
And yet EDI is too often treated as optional, I should say, rather than foundational.
Mm.
And black and brown professionals continue to encounter microaggression, unconscious bias, and systemic barriers to progression. I've been coaching black and brown women for a while, not exclusively, by the way, but I do. I coach a lot of them, and they experience these barriers. I've even heard recent anecdotes of social workers participating in the October March led by Tommy Robinson, which actually speaks volumes about the depth of the challenge. So
Wow.
yes, just to go back to where we started, the landscape has changed. There has been progress, but it's uneven, it's reversible, and it's increasingly contested. And without sustained leadership commitment, EDI doesn't embed, it erodes. And when it erodes, those most affected are the very people organisation claim to serve and support. And one
Mm.
thing to add is that social work is a female-dominated profession and has many women in leadership roles, many women. But what I've noticed is that men are often disproportionately represented at the top. And that says a lot.
I think it's similar in education, and I would sort of say it would be similar in the NHS as well.
Yeah,
That there's a system
yeah,
of women get so far, and then there's a disappearance around that. And we know that systemically, the world is, as you were saying, uneven, and how much, some organizations continue to work and others probably falter. I want to kind of turn our focus a little bit into sort of some of the internal aspects that Black and Asian women
mhm,
might experience, like mental saboteurs you mentioned in your coaching work.
yeah.
And what is the most common form of negative self-talk that you see undermining ambitious women of color? And what would you say to them as you coach them uh, to turn that around
Okay.
rather than turn it off? I think to turn it around, really.
Yeah. I'm not sure we can turn it off. I don't think we can turn it
No,
off.
no, I don't
I
think
mean,
so either.
yeah, it's a great question, actually, Nita. I love this question. I mean, a significant part of my coaching actually focuses on developing mental fitness, as you said. And what I mean by that is the capacity to respond to challenges with greater resilience, clarity, and less stress. Yeah. So just like physical fitness, mental fitness is about training.
Mm.
Obviously, we're training the mind, and we build new neural pathways that support
Yes.
more constructive responses while weakening the ones that fuel on unhelpful thinking. So over time, this leads to stronger performance, improved well-being, and healthier relationships. Now, the most common form of negative self-talk that I encounter in my coaching, and I see this undermining ambitious women, women who are very, very capable, quite talented. And so it could be some version of, I'm not good enough.
Mm.
That is very common. And it often shows up as, I'll get found out, which is closely linked to imposter syndrome,
Mm.
or I'm not ready yet.
Yeah.
And of course, the classic, I'll fail if I go for it.
Mm.
There comes the fear of failure. Now, for Black women in particular, another deeply ingrained belief that frequently surfaces is I have to prove myself. I have to prove myself. Very common. And this can drive a relentless pursuit of more qualifications, more credentials, more evidence of worth before feeling that they are ready for promotion or progression. And this is one I can identify with. I have lots of qualifications, including an MBA, yeah, which I actually didn't need, but there you go. There you go. And the irony is that many Black women I work with are already significantly more qualified and capable than their peers. And yet we know that qualifications alone don't guarantee promotion or opportunity, particularly in systems where bias still operates.
So
Now,
what does qualify? So given what you're saying is, you don't need to have that MBA or that qualification. What do you think? Oh, no, no, let me rephrase that. How can Black and Asian women get out of their own way so
right,
that they can fully embrace
yeah,
what
great
they
question.
have?
Yeah. Well, you can't change your thought pattern
Yeah,
if you haven't learned to recognize it.
right.
So first you start by building awareness of that, of your thought pattern. And the goal is not to eliminate negative thoughts, because as we said at the beginning, you can't do it. They're human. We all have them. Doesn't matter who we are. The goal is to stop them letting that, sorry, the goal is to stop letting them run the show. And once a woman learns to identify that inner saboteur voice and all the feelings that come with it, she can consciously shift into a more grounded, emotional, and compassionate response. And from there, we focus on strengthening a part of the mind that leads with perspective, self-trust, and intentional action. Because when mental fitness improves, women stop over preparing out of fear and they start trusting their readiness. And they make career decisions from confidence rather than from self-protection. When they make that shift,
Yeah.
it's often transformational.
I think what this speaks to me is, as you describe it, as a coach, is the ability to make different choices, make a choice, so that rather than, as you say, rather than from a place of fear, even if I decide I was going to make a decision based on fear, it's a choice I'm making. Whereas, it's about giving women the sort of the mental capacity, the neuroplasticity that you're talking about to choose. something that works for
Honesty.
them as
Yes.
opposed to, oh, this is what I'm comfortable and familiar with.
Yeah. It's about making better choices, isn't it? It's about making choices that are going to improve things for you and for those around you, actually. Because we're making choices all the time. Even if we decide not to choose, we're still making a choice. You know, when you're getting the negative self-talk, you can sit with it, allow it to stress you out.
Yeah,
So it'll impede your performance, do all
yeah,
sorts of negative stuff. But
yeah,
then you make a decision, I'm not going to sit with it. This is what I'm going to do to
yeah,
change things.
yeah.
You make that choice.
Yes. And another thing that actually, as an Asian woman, that I certainly
Hmm.
had some awareness. I was reading, this is 2016. I was reading a book called Covering, and it made me think about the pressure to code switch, or mute parts of myself, particularly, when I was facilitating uh large workshops with an audience that didn't look like me, and how I remember reading that book and going, oh wow, I've actually neutralized part of myself so that I could be acceptable in the audience, and I think I did that probably unconsciously.
Mm.
However, reading that book and having thinking about it myself made me think, well, actually, maybe it's a part of my own survival, my own thriving, that I chose to do that. And it's not something that is negative, it's something that I want to know within the context that I was in. At some places, it was a choice I made, really. So, and that didn't stop me feeling I was less authentic. It's just felt that I was within a certain context. I know that I needed to show up in this way
Yeah.
in order to be, uh, in order to deliver what I needed to deliver. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that kind of tension you're describing, Nita, it's very real.
Yeah.
And it's something I see consistently in my work with Black and brown women in social work and public service organisations and elsewhere. And it's
Mm,
something I do myself because as you say, you're muting parts of yourself. Could be your speech, your tone, your behaviour, in
mm,
order to fit into the different environments. Yeah. And that can be absolutely exhausting, as I'm sure you know. Now, many of my clients they've learned often very early in their career, in their life, that success can feel conditional. So it's like be competent, but not threatening.
mm.
Be visible, but not too visible.
Visible. Yeah.
Be authentic, but do so only within limits that feel safe to other people. And we're usually talking about white people here.
Mm,
And so what switching is, which you mentioned earlier, but just to emphasize it, is that it's a survival strategy.
mm,
And, it is a choice, but it's also a survival strategy. We choose it for that reason. And often it comes automatic. Yeah.
mm,
And it can be useful in certain contexts, but it comes at a cost. Exhaustion, disconnection, and a bit of a gradual erosion of self-trust, I should say. Um, when I'm coaching people, I don't frame this as a simple choice between being professional and being authentic, because that sets up a false opposition.
mm.
Because professionalism isn't neutral, is it? It's
No.
culturally defined. Yeah. And much of what we call professional is rooted in white middle class norms, which
Mm,
mean black and brown women are often they're expected
Mm,
to adapt more, explain more, and shrink more.
mm,
So the work, therefore, is about intentionality rather than performance. I help clients get clear on who they are at their
mm.
core. And we do that by identifying their values, their strengths, their leadership style, and then they decide when and how they adapt rather than feeling compelled to do so automatically. And that shift alone is incredibly powerful because it moves them from self-protection to self, how can I put it? Like self-creation, self-authorship. And we also talk honestly about context and risk. So authenticity doesn't mean disclosing everything
Yes.
or ignoring organizational
Yes.
realities. Yeah, you have to take those into account.
Yeah.
It means choosing alignment over assimilation.
Yeah.
It means asking, what parts of me am I muting out of fear rather than strategy? And what would it look
Yeah.
like to bring more of my voice, my perspective, and my authority into this space
Mm.
without apology? But asking those questions, coming up with the answers. Over time, my clients learn that they don't need to dilute their identity to be credible. You know, they've got a strategy for it. They learn how to occupy professional spaces with confidence, um, with boundaries, and with what I would call cultural integrity. And when that happens, professionalism stops being about fitting in and start being about leading with clarity, with presence, and crucially, with self-respect.
And choice, I think it's in there as well for me. I think choice is also an important element of that. I mean, we could have a whole
Right.
podcast on authenticity because I just think,
Absolutely.
when I hear individuals, talk about authenticity as if there's a common understanding of it. And I don't think there is one understanding of authenticity. I think it means different things to different people. And I love the work that you're doing with your clients is getting them to say, well, what context, can I want to show up, and be okay with that. And it's about, for me, doing it consciously
Mm.
as opposed to fitting in. And one of the things that I know, I was looking for this, is Brene Brown, who I'm sure you know.
Yeah,
Years ago, this is going back a long while. One of the things she often talks about is the 5 Ps, pleasing, proving, performing, pretending, and perfecting. And I know, as a woman of color, I've done all of that,
yeah,
in a way that, or if I do this, then I can be perceived in a particular light. And it's about, well, for me now, it's I don't I am very conscious of it. I don't need to do this because when we stand tall and grounded in ourselves, I think we become less conditional of how we need to show up.
yeah,
That's
absolutely.
what I think anyway.
Yeah,
And the work that we do with our clients is to do that, really.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And so I also want to come back to what I said at the beginning, Claudia, about the success equation, in your book.
yeah,
And I was fascinated in reading about the 10 women's journey and how they got to where they got to. Tell us a little bit about your acronyms of determination, resilience, resistance, and purpose.
mhm.
And how did you arrive at that as a concept?
Right. Oh, ah. I think, can I give you a little bit of background to the book?
Yeah, sure.
Get me into that. Um, I had like an aha moment when I decided to write the book, but there is a context. I have to give you the context of it. And it was around about 2019 when the UK's love affair with Meghan Markle began to unravel. Right. And when that started, it just felt predictable to me. Because here was a smart, confident, accomplished, foreign, dual heritage woman. And having said that, my doorbell's just gone again. So sorry, could we just
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'll just yeah. So basically, Meghan Markle, smart, confident, accomplished, dual heritage, but foreign. And she dared to marry into the royal family. And we all know that's an institution with a very narrow mould for what royal women are expected to be. She didn't fit the mould. And I remember thinking, it's only a matter of time that before this unravels. And sure enough, the narrative shifted. And I watched almost in disbelief, but not surprised really, as the tabloids began to spin increasingly hostile stories about her, painting her as difficult, demanding, even aggressive. And old stereotypes resurfaced, repackaged for public consumption. And yet it was obvious how much of an asset she could have been, someone who reflected modern multicultural Britain and brought intelligence, warmth, and global credibility. So what struck me most was how familiar it all felt. I'd seen this pattern repeatedly in organisations that appoint a black woman into leadership. Initially praise, followed by heightened scrutiny, then character assassination when she refuses to conform and contort herself to fit the expectations. And
Mm.
Meghan was never going to do any of that. And I became really affected by what was unfolding, like really affected. I really felt for her. And I found myself awake at night wondering how Meghan was coping. What was the support like? Was she getting any? Um, and what toll was this taking on her mentally and emotionally? And inevitably, because I could identify with some of what was going on, my thoughts turned to the black and brown women in my own life, my clients, my colleagues, my friends, who were navigating similar dynamics, just they didn't have the global spotlight. And one morning, I was doing my meditation, and it became clear to me that these women's stories needed to be told. It's just like this spark went off in the middle of my meditation. And I wanted to research them. I wanted to understand the strategies they used to get on and get up, and the challenges that they encountered along the way. I wanted to bring their lived experiences into the light, not just to validate them, but so that other black and brown women could learn, could feel less alone and feel more equipped. And that was the birth of Undeterred.
Mm.
And what continues to resonate today is the same truth that inspired me to write the book. Because talent isn't the issue, capability isn't the issue. The real work is about navigating systems that were never designed with us in mind and doing so without losing yourself in the process. Now, when I was researching, it's funny, I didn't set out to find this success equation because I didn't know it existed. it emerged as I did my research, and I discovered that they all had something in common aside from race and gender. They were all from different backgrounds, different walks of life, different
Hmm.
ages, different classes, but they had this thing in common. It was an equation, that's what I called it. They were all determined, they all were resilient. They had to roll with the punches and take the challenges, and it developed their resilience. They were all resistant. They didn't accept what was happening to them. They found a way through. And they all had a purpose. And that was the thing that kept them going, the purpose. It gave them direction. When things were really bad, that was the thing that kept them going. And I discovered that through doing the research. And since writing the book, I've discovered another piece to that equation, and it's a third R, and it's reinvention. Because careers don't take not a linear process.
Not at all anymore.
They're up and down,
Yes.
and you do have to reinvent yourself along the way. And these women have. And I can't work out how I missed it. How did I miss it after writing the book? But it became clear afterward. Maybe I should do an update. Who knows?
Well,
And
no, I think you'd be
throw
encouraged to
reinvention
do
into that. Yeah.
an update. And
Yeah.
having read the book, I can certainly recognize the determination, the resilience, the resistance and the purpose. And in fact, I think on some levels I recognize my mother as a migrant who came in to live in the UK, with very little English that she spoke at the time, that how she even, as a part of her, she wouldn't have put it in those words, but she had those elements in
Mm.
there because I think, she wanted a certain life for all of us. So, and I think purpose is like your northern star. You
Yeah,
don't lose it. It's not something, it might shift a little bit. However, it's still there as a guiding principle for
absolutely.
you to
Yeah.
have when everything else is collapsing. Now, one of the other things that I want to sort of touch on is about the role of allies, um, how allies can play within an organizational context, or maybe even in your friendship groups,
Mhm.
as a way of supporting. Because what I read in the books is some of the women had in the Undeterred book, they had people around them who supported them, who are allies for them. What's your kind of perspective on that?
Right. Um, well, they say no woman is an island.
It's true.
We do need that support network, and it's important for us to have allies, um, both in terms of race and gender, because they have power and privilege that we don't have, and they can make things happen in a way that would be harder for us. And I think the single most effective thing that they can do, um, especially if they're allies in leadership, is to truly see us, black and brown women, for who we are, to really see us. And what that means is seeing us as individuals with distinct skills, leadership styles, and potential, and not through the lens of stereotypes, tropes, or deficit-based assumptions, because that's how we're often seen. So too often, well-intentioned leaders, they focus on supporting diversity in the abstract, while failing to recognize the specific contributions and barriers that we experience. Um, yeah, that we experience directly often. There's a client story that really stayed with me. And I coached her probably about 3 or 4 years ago. It's with a black woman, middle manager, social worker, talented, deeply committed to what she was doing. But understandably, she was frustrated and worn down by her experiences at work. And she had been encouraged by a senior manager to go for promotion. And she'd gone for it time after time after time and was continually knocked back. And she couldn't work out what was going on. I mean, the whole bit about race didn't come into that. The coaching highlighted it. What truly shifted things for her wasn't the encouragement alone. And I'm talking about the encouragement from that senior manager. The moment she realized she could genuinely trust this manager, this director level manager, and see her as an ally, was when the manager clearly articulated what she could already see in her. And that was her leadership strength, insight, and her value, and all the things she would bring to the table.
Mm.
And she didn't speak in vague reassurances. She named it. She made this woman's contribution visible. And that act of recognition was powerful. It was about pushing her forward,
Mm.
not for the sake of optics. It was about being seen and validated in a system where black women are so often overlooked or underestimated. And for my client, that clarity built trust, built confidence, and the belief that she didn't have to carry the weight alone. She had an ally, and an ally at the top of the organization. So to be a genuine ally, you need to have self-education. And leaders must be willing to understand how white privilege and white fragility operate in workplaces, not because we want them to feel guilty, but because it provides a lens for insight. Because without that awareness, it's easy to become defensive, dismissive, or silent at the very moment when
Mm.
advocacy is needed most. And crucially, allies need to accept that they will make mistakes. There's no doubt about it. It's, but allyship is not about getting it perfect.
Indeed.
Nobody can do that. It's
Yeah.
about staying engaged in
Mm.
spite of the mistakes. And when missteps happen, the work to be done is to listen, to reflect, to use the learning and do better, rather than retreating or becoming discouraged. When leaders combine that self-awareness with action, challenging bias and microaggressions when they see it, sponsoring talent, using their power to open doors, allyship moves from intentions to impact. And that's what genuinely shifts the needle for undeterred women in organizations. That's
I
what I think.
completely agree with that. I think that is what you're saying is so powerful. And I want to sort of kind of circle back because I'm sure there are uh, our listeners who may feel deterred, disheartened, or like they're hitting a glass ceiling right now. What might be one simple, powerful piece of insight or advice would you give them to help them,
Uh-huh.
be in the space of the undeter self tomorrow?
Okay. It, I'm laughing because it's like a piece of advice with many parts to it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, And that is for you to get clear on who you are and
Yeah.
what you bring to the table. Now, I mentioned earlier, I talked about allies seeing you for who you are and what you bring to the table. You need to see it yourself. And it's amazing how many women don't. So, and it sounds simple, but it's remarkable um, how many talented, capable, and women I work with, they lack this clarity. They know they work hard, they know they care, but when asked to articulate their strengths, their values, or what truly differentiates them from other people, they hesitate. So my advice is that you start with your values. You want to see who you really are. Start with your values and not just the long list, but go for your top three because these
Mm.
are the real drivers. They matter because when you're clear on your values, you understand yourself. When you're clear on your top three, you really know what's pushing you forward. And
That it,
also, sorry?
sorry, go on. No, no, no. I was saying that that's so powerful.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree with you. Sorry, continue.
And when you can make sense, when you know your values, you can make sense of the discomfort in
Mm.
certain roles or environment. Because often we sit there and we're wondering why we're feeling really uncomfortable. And I would say 9 times out of 10, one of your values is being compromised by what's going on.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can, the other thing you can do when you know your values, be clear on them, is that you can assess whether this organization you're working in is right for you. Are the values of that organization aligned with who you are? Are they aligned with your values? Or are they compromising your values? And values give you, it's like, yeah, I'd call it an internal compass.
Mm.
When everything else feels uncertain, you've got that internal compass. And when you know your values, you're going to be clear on why you're reacting in the way you are. The other thing is for you to get clear on your strength and what makes you stand out. And think about that in terms of what you've delivered that's made a real impact. Where do people consistently rely on you? What do you do differently or better than most people? And this is not about arrogance, it's not about bragging, it's about accuracy. It's about seeing exactly what you're bringing to the table. And finally, we talked about purpose earlier in the book, Undeterred. Finally, reconnect with your passion and your purpose. What drives you? And it's likely to be connected to your values. What gives you, what drives you? What gives you direction? What will keep you going when the challenges pile up and the doubt creeps in? Now, purpose doesn't remove obstacles, but it gives you the stamina to keep going. And this is the work I do with women in coaching, because when they're anchored in their strengths, their values and their purpose, they stop seeking permission. They know exactly who they are and they remember it. And that's how you step back into your undeterred self.
Yeah. And your
Uh,
own
uh,
power.
yeah, into your own power. Yeah,
Power.
nice one.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
I had a talented but frustrated Black woman client who was continuously knocked back for promotion. And when she discovered her strengths, her values, her passion, and her purpose, it gave her the courage to actually apply for that promotion again, and she got it. And I actually think it was the confidence she got from knowing who she is, yeah, and knowing what an asset she would bring into this organization and would continue to do so in a senior role.
Mm.
I think that was a real game changer for her.
I think what you describe, Claudia, I think those are value, know who you are, know your purpose,
Mm.
are elements which are very powerful because it enables you, I guess, to stand in your own power and also to get out of your own way as well.
Yeah,
Because it's quietening the voices, as we were talking earlier on, is the little saboteurs that all live within all of us, and quietening that voice and
yeah.
focusing on, realigning yourself with, what are my values, being
Who am
yourself
I?
and your purpose.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, great. This has been a very yummy conversation, Claudia, and you've
Oh, I
given
love that
me.
word, yummy.
Oh, I used to love the word delicious as well. This has been a
Oh,
very
oh,
delicious,
good.
yummy conversation because it had such richness with beautiful examples that you've drawn out. And I'm sure for the listeners who are listening to this, if they'll have your contact details that you can, if they want to get in touch with you. It certainly
Okay.
has given me moments of reflections. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. There's, even for somebody who's coaches as well, it's still, the journey never stops
Yeah, it
in
doesn't,
terms
does
of
it?
learning.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah.
No. So
That's why
thank
we
you so
do
much.
it.
Sorry?
That's why we do it.
And that's why we do it. It never
Yeah,
stops because the
yeah,
unfolding
yeah.
is the great part of it. So thank you for giving your time
Oh, you're
and
welcome.
your wisdom in this space.
And thank you very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure and I've loved it.
Good. Lovely. Lovely.